Welcome to the Technology Alchemist. Our sponsor is your Virtual CTO. The Virtual CTO is a technology services company specializing in increasing your revenue and profit through a close examination of your technology engine. Your Virtual CTO offers exclusive coaching for business leaders that is the only business coaching program that includes technology as part of the program. If you want to learn how you can make more money by tuning up your technology engine, you can learn more at getyourvirtualcto.com. Today, I'm joined by Mads Singers. Mads has more than 10 years of experience in Fortune 500 companies such as Xerox and IBM, and more than 7 years experience coaching and consulting online entrepreneurs. He has spoken at many large events such as CMSEO, TiCon, DCBKK, and DMSS Bali, SEO Spring Training, and Survive and Thrive e-commerce summit. Mads currently owns and runs 3 companies, managing more than 100 people. He doesn't just talk the talk, he also walks the walk. Mads shares his management philosophy knowledge through the Effective Management Master course and community. Welcome to the show, Mads.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here.
I'm really glad to have you here. So tell me a little bit about your background. Let's get into your background first. So what got you started as sort of a business management expert?
Yeah, I mean, I actually started already when I was younger. I wanted to be a tech guy. So I wanted to be a developer or something like that. But what happened was when I was 18, I got a job corporately with Xerox first. And I bumped into this manager and I was blown away by how she managed people and the difference she did. And that basically, like, in a couple of months, I went from being, I want to be the tech dude to I want to do what she does, which was management. I was sick and tired of school at the time, and everyone told me to go get a 5-year management degree or some stupid stuff. And I was like, no chance on earth. If it was 5 days, I could maybe do it, but 5 years, not a chance. So basically, I ended up doing rigorous self-study for many years. In total, even after I got into management, I probably read about a book a week for 12 plus years. So I've been through a lot of books. I've been through a lot of content. I was paying, like even when I was working, I was paying out of my own pocket to go to all these management seminars and so on. So I really invested a lot in it, and I was so passionate about it. Even working with a company like IBM, there's lots of great people, but I found few that had the passion I had around it, right? And eventually I started coaching people beside doing my work at IBM. And, one day I was kind of like, well, I have my 60, 70 week IBM weeks, and then I do my 5 hours a week coaching. And, at some point when the coaching starts paying more than the 70-hour job, then you're kind of like, something doesn't make sense here. And that was effectively how I took the jump. So ever since then, and that's about also 2013 and so. And pretty much ever since then, I've started a couple of more businesses, but I've lived primarily in Asia since. So Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, that's kind of the key places I've been. And what's really beneficial out here is there's a huge group of sort of startups. There's a huge group of entrepreneurs living out here, and basically people who are starting businesses. They can start out here at a much lower cost because both because cost of labor is significantly cheaper, but also cost of living, right? In the beginning, when you're trying to get a business off the ground, very often cash is important. So great entrepreneurial environment out here. And I basically went from, initially I was coaching all corporate people, and most people, I mean, if people pay for themselves, yeah, they're interested. But sometimes you'll walk into a session and 5 people's like, yeah, great, we got 4 hours to sleep now. And but the benefit working with small businesses and even managers within small businesses, like, they're just so much more passionate and driven, and I love it, right?
So what if you had to sum up your management philosophy in one sentence, what would it be?
Yeah, one sentence. That's very short. I'll basically sum up that for me, management is about treating everyone as the individuals they are. And you need to learn to put the right people into the right boxes.
So, yeah, I agree with you on that. I used to hear this saying of having the right people on the bus, but I always felt like having the right people on the bus was it's a valiant idea, but the reality is you also need the people in the right seats on the bus. If you have somebody driving the bus who doesn't know how to drive, you're going to crash. So I've always that's a really good point. Treating people the right way and putting them in the right place is really important. Um, so you mentioned books, and I just wonder what you think about a leader. How much reading should a typical leader do?
I mean, for me, personally, like I would always aim for at least 5 hours a week, right? And I would say that's a minimum. Now, how you do that development is, up to you. I definitely think books for me have been huge. But there's many, I mean, nowadays, amazing podcasts and things like that are very valuable as well, right? But I think one of the good things about books, particularly if you're reading the right ones, is that and you can get a ton of recommendation from friends and stuff. But I think some of the best books are by far the best time investment you can ever do, right? Like there's some powerful stuff out there, and like that life-changing stuff. I mean, one of the ones that really changed my life was called First Break All the Rules, by a guy called Marcus Buckingham. And the essence of the book is really the fact that a manager or a leader is not someone that have a certain characteristic. Anyone anywhere can learn to become a good leader and manager. What they have to figure out is what they're really good at and how they excel as a manager and push that strength. Because what happens in the world today is that a lot of people look at the sort of Elon Musks and they look at their idols. But the thing is, if personality wise they're totally different from those people, then that's a very, very bad idea. Because if you're trying to be someone that you're absolutely not, like someone like Musk will call up people at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? Now, if you're not that guy, like if you're not the guy that can schedule 35 minutes a day for your kids, right? Like you won't be Elon Musk and you won't succeed trying. What every individual have to figure out, and as a business owner, as a manager in a business, what they have to figure out is what is their key strength and how do they utilize that to get the best results as a manager, right? And as an example, like some people are great at, verbally talking, like drawing great visions for the team and so on. Some people are just, bang on, like they're good at pushing people. Some people, a lot of tech people, they're great with numbers, they're great with data, they make amazing decisions. Some people are just very sort of, personal, they're great at bringing people together, making sure, caring about everyone and so on. So there's different kind of personalities, right? But you need to figure out what yours is, and you need to figure out what you excel at. Because again, most business owners fall in the trap of doing majority of stuff that they suck at because they suck at it, right? So everyone have this idea that, oh, someone said I'm bad at this thing, I need to learn how to do it. I'm like, no, if you're really bad at it and it doesn't come natural to you, you want to learn how not to do it. So
Yeah, you want to learn to delegate that to somebody else. So, how important to you do you feel work-life balance is?
I think it's a very modern term. Again, what I would say is when you love what you do, it becomes a lot less relevant. I'm like personally, like I've been fairly location independent. Like I travel around, and I don't need to be in a certain spot in a certain office. So for me, it's much more about having the right flexibility in life and just making sure that if I want to go to the gym every day at 12, I can do that. If I want to eat lunch at 3 o'clock, I can do that. So for me, it's much more the flexibility, both myself and the family. Like the fact that you can pick up a random week and take the family somewhere. um, for me, that's more important than the actual balance. Like most people just look at it as an hours game, and effectively most people, and this is a lot of what I go through in my management training, but like the challenge is a lot of people, they make it an hours game. And the problem is it becomes this like, oh yeah, I want to tell my friends that I work 12 hours a day, so I'm going to sit here in the office until 10 p.m. and everyone thinks I'm hustling and doing good shit. Reality is, like, for majority of people, 98% of people, if you spend more than 8 hours a day in the office, you're being very ineffective, right? Because the problem is when you work a 12-hour day, your ability to deliver the next morning, not in the afternoon, but the next morning, decreases significantly. And the biggest challenge for entrepreneurs and business owners, it's not the hours. It's making the right choices, it's focus, and it's getting the right shit done, right? And the problem is when you're tired from the day before and so on, you're much more likely to just grab what's in front of you to feel productive instead of actually doing the things that matters, right? And talking about books, I mean, a book like The One Thing is a great book in terms of that kind of thinking.
Do you mentioned focus and getting the right things done. Do you have a recommendation for how to determine what the right things to get done are?
Yeah, a few. I mean, the fundamental is always asking and like understanding from yourself. And this is actually something I have from Drucker. But basically, if you say right now the next quarter priority is management, oh, sorry, that's a bad one. Priority is sales, right? If you go back and look at your schedule in the end of the month, and you say that, like, you actually look at your schedule and what you've been doing, and if 70% of your time have been not sales, then your priority was not sales, right? So again, like I always start out, and I do it generally on a quarterly basis, but I then look at, what are my top level priorities this quarter? What is the top things that I can move forward in this business? And then I look at, like, what are the initiatives that I need to put in place? What are the actions that need to be taken? But that comes secondary, right? So a lot of people tend to scramble around. They do a bit of operations, they do a bit of sales, there's a bit of marketing, and there's no coordination. And the problem is when you do a little bit of things all over the place, you don't get that huge benefit, right? Whereas if you consistently just focus on sales for 3 months, like, you're gonna make a much bigger impact than if it's kind of like something you do occasionally, right? So my recommendation, particularly, I mean, if you're the only person in the business, you need to do different things. But if you have a team with you, like, let the team know and say, this quarter I focus on operations, right? We're gonna streamline operations, we're gonna make things smooth, we're gonna do whatever. But if you have a focus area where you sit down and you focus for a period of time on that area and get it, quote, fixed for the time being, then you can move on to something else, right? And it's much better, rather than trying to do everything all the time, it's much better to focus in and say, this is what I'm doing right now. And then basically what I do, I plan my week, I plan every Sunday night. And what I do is I basically take these big chunks. So I usually do 3 work segments a day, either 1 hour or 1 hour and a half per chunk. And it depends on how much is in my calendar and
Right.
stuff. But I basically schedule in 3 chunks a day. And I basically have a very specific purpose for those 3 times. And most people try and schedule 8, 9 hours in the calendar, and the thing is, it always fails, right? Because there's always stuff come up. So what I've always found is if you schedule 3 to 4 hours a day of planned specific time where you don't check email and you don't answer your phone, you just, in that 1 hour slot, you just do that one thing, right? Then you move shit forward, right? And that's how I do it. So basically on the Sunday night for the whole week, I sit and say, okay, sales is priority. What are the projects I need to move forward? What am I going to do Monday? What are the 3 work slots? What are the 3 work slots Tuesday? And that way, like, I make a lot of stuff happen.
It makes sense because what I tell my clients is to be intentional about what they're focusing on. So if you decide that first quarter, you're going to grow your social media presence, then the majority of what you do should be focused on growing your social media presence. Or I get clients come to me about a project and they'll give me a list of things they want to accomplish, and I'll ask them, give me your top 3 priorities, and they'll tell me what those are. And then they'll say, but we don't want to work on that yet. We don't want to spend the money on that yet. We want to work on this. And I question, okay, how invested in those top 3 priorities are you if you're saying they're your top 3 priorities, but you're ready to go off and do something different? I think people don't, it's just like content creation. We have learned over time from the really good content creators that you need to spend, if you want to put out videos every week, you need to have a day during the month where you spend a few hours doing nothing but recording videos. If you don't do that, people say, oh, it's only a half hour of my time for each video and I want to do 4 videos. Well, then block off 2 hours somewhere, because if you try to do it a half hour a week, you will invariably bump one of those and you fall behind, and then you stress out about that. So that's another question, is how should an entrepreneur deal with the stress that goes along with having to run a business?
So a lot of it comes down to good management, right? So again, like one of my business outsourcing company, we have about 130 staff, right? And I spend about 2 hours a week on that business. Again, because I have the right people in place. I do 2 1-to-1s, which is 30 minutes each. I do a team meeting that's half an hour with those two people as well. And then I spend about half an hour on, random stuff that comes up. But again, I've put the right team in place, right? And it's not like I don't have to go in and spend a week just focusing on it. I don't, right? So I think majority of the time, the problem people have with stress, it's not that there's a lot to do, but again, it comes back to this thing. Like no one ever walks home and everything they could possibly do is done. Like it doesn't happen, right? So you might as well resign to that thought right away and say that will never happen. There's always stuff you can do. But the thing is, if you go for your priorities, if you go for your focus, that is generally the thing that moves the ball the most forward. Then generally, a lot of the stress disappears, right? Because if you're fixing some of the problems, if you see that you're fixing some of the long-term things and you're making a big difference, I think for most of my clients at least, that's where they benefit big time, right? Because fundamentally it's really, really that important to make sure that you have like that focus and what you're doing. Like, because the problem is if you're just, what most people are doing is just like, oh, I have to do this thing over here, I have to do this thing over here, then it's easy to get stressed because you're like, oh, all these important things have to happen. And Eisenhower have one of these cool squares where you have like a, whatever is urgent and important you need to work on, whatever is uh, not important but urgent, you need to hand over to someone else, and whatever is important, whatever is urgent, not important, or whatever, that you have to delegate to someone else, right? So I basically look at, and this again from a business owner perspective, many business owners go down in the business and do the stuff down here. And everyone always say, oh, you should work on your business, not in your business. Everyone say that, la da da, but they don't actually get what it means. And working on your business means doing big thinking stuff, right? It's more strategy, it's more like that kind of stuff. Again, don't go down and start answering customer service mails because the customer service person isn't there. Like you need to do that if you have an organization of more than 5 people, you need to get that stuff done in the organization. It should never come back to you, right? So you need to build out those systems. You need to make sure that, the biggest management challenge in tech, the two biggest is, number one is delegation, just because most people are super perfectionist, they're super detail oriented, they suck at delegation. Again, that's what I work with most of my clients on and help them fix that. And like so many of my clients, right, they go from having this 100-hour week till having a 30-hour week. And actually one of my really good clients, he just got a baby, took 3 months off, where he's literally spending less than an hour a week on the business, and he can do that, right? And it doesn't take that much. Like if you have a decent sized organization, it doesn't take that much, but it's really all in mindset. It's really understanding and learning what are the right things to do, right? And then the second thing that a lot of tech people struggle with is communication, right? And natural tech people's communication, it's first of all, it's long emails. So, if you ever get an email that's like an A4 page, it's a tech detail oriented person. And you can even learn to make those kind of mails somewhat effective, but most techies like that really struggle to be effective communicators. They struggle to condense down what they're talking about in an effective way and really get it across the right way.
Yeah, I think this pandemic has shown us that a lot of businesses don't really have a strategy. They're more into the daily tactics than the long-term strategy. And one of the things I've been preaching for a long time, and especially during this time, is that having a strategy for the long term is key, because it's kind of like going on a trip with a where you don't know where you're actually, you've never been there before, but you don't bring a map. So literally any road will eventually get you there, but what's the most efficient way? You got to have a roadmap to get there, and it just makes sense. So the strategy part is really something I 100% agree with you, and it's something I teach my clients. It's one of the reasons they hire me, is to build them a strategy. And another thing they'll do is they'll have a technology strategy. If they have a strategy, they'll have a technology strategy that doesn't match their business strategy. And that, of course, is, that's not going to work. So one of my jobs is to align that. So I think it's very interesting you talk about strategy versus tactics, because so many people are bad at that.
And basically, like I work with a lot of clients on that exact thing, right? So the thing is, goals should always go from the top down, right? And what happens in many companies is each department set their own goal, and the problem is they don't match up, right? So you'll have sales saying, "Oh, we want to double sales." Then you have operations saying, "Oh, we want to save a bit on operations." You're like, "Wait a minute, if you're going to double sales but cut cost on operations, how's that going to work?"
How's that
Right?
going to work?
You need a plan that work across the business, and that only works from the top. So your top goal, your top focus in terms of what is the company going to achieve, that needs to be broken down in each department, saying how are we going to achieve that.
Well, in our business, we look at what we call vital factors, and it's more than just revenue or profit, but we look at vital factors, and then all of our goals are geared towards keeping those vital factors as healthy as possible. So it's sort of you can't manage what you don't measure, and that's where the strategies come in. And when we talk about, someone will come to the table at a meeting with, I want to do this. And we'll say, well, how does that align with our vital factors? What's it going to do to this? What's it going to do to that? And unless the plan can enhance those things, then it's not something we should be working on. So I definitely agree with you there. So tell me about this course of yours, the Effective Management Master. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, basically what it does, and so the first part is probably, I mean, it's great for everyone, but particularly tech people, right? So the first part is going through the DISC personality framework, and that's basically learning to understand different types of personalities, how to communicate with them, how they're motivated, how to be most effective with different types of people, right? And that's really the essence. And that, I mean, for technology people, this lesson is probably the most important. Then it goes through the standard meetings, so how to do effective one-to-ones. And by the way, you should have that weekly with anyone that reports to you. How to do effective team meetings. By the way, team meetings is for the team. It's not for the manager to sit and talk for 45 minutes. Then it goes through goal setting, delegation, how to give feedback. Again, tech companies and the inability to give feedback is, yeah, let's just leave it at that.
Goes back to that
I mean,
communication issue.
right. The thing is, I talk with so many staff members that are like, how often do you talk with my boss? Oh, every time he tells me I made a mistake. Like, so the only time your boss talk with you is when you make a mistake. Yeah, I'm doing a crap job because you have talked to me 10 times this month. And I'm like, whew. Right? So again, positive feedback is more important than the constructive stuff. And the thing is with feedback, right? A lot of it reverse psychology. If you tell someone, hey dude, you're late every day, like what's up? People get defensive. If you do the opposite, if you'd say, hey man, you're on time today, great. Do you know how much it helps the team? Try it. Try it and see what happens, because the positive feedback generally have a much bigger range of improvements. The same if you have a staff member that makes one mistake pretty frequently, find examples where they don't and give them positive feedback on those examples and see what happens.
See, I agree with you there. I think my personal philosophy is lead by example. So if you want, I'll use a personal issue. If you want your home to be kept neat and clean, then you can't ignore the spill on the counter or the thing that's laying on the ground. You have to show other people in your family that you dig in and you clean those things up, and they generally will follow your lead. The other thing, though, is like you say, it works really well with teenagers. If you want the teenager to like not leave plates on the living room table or whatever, when they put it away, you praise them for putting it away, and you explain to them how much it helps that they did that. And they respond to that by doing more of it because they want more of that praise, rather than saying, hey, you didn't put your plate away, please go put your plate away. I'm not saying you should never do that, but if that's all you do, like you gave the example of, my boss talked to me 10 times, I must be doing a terrible job. That's a morale killer. And I found in this last year, I've really changed my mindset a lot about who I work with, and both client and employee. And I have found there's a certain type of people that fit well with me. Everyone always talks about find your avatar, and then that's who you want to work with, and that's all well and good, and I know it's effective. But the problem is that even within the avatar, there's going to be a lot of people that you still don't connect with and don't fit, and you have to find a way to find the people you do connect with, both who work for you and who you work with.
The last 2 modules of the course is around recruitment and how to fire people, and exactly what you say. So one of the big problem in tech companies is that tech people like hiring other tech people. So even when they have to do marketing, they hire a tech guy to do marketing, right? And coming back to what you were saying, one of the big benefits of going through this disc training I have is the fact that you learn to understand people who are not like you much better. And it helps you become a better communicator with, like, if you're a tech guy, it helps you communicate better with salespeople, with marketing people, and so on. And it's so critical for success as a business owner, right? And basically in my recruitment module, I go through a lot of this stuff, like, recruitment is sales. So most people look at recruitment as fulfillment. It's like, I have 3 open things, I need to put stuff in there. That's not the right way. Recruitment is sales. You need to build a sales funnel. So you literally need to do this and say, here's the requirement. We want a lot of people in. And then, like, a lot of time people have like 10 applicants and they make a choice, right? Like, if we ever have any job where we have less than 100 applicants, like, it's not going to go well, right? So you want a lot of applicants, and you then want to make, like, test, you want to do different things in between. One of the hardest jobs to get right now is a job at Google, because you need to go through 7 different interviews. That's one of the biggest successes, one of the reasons why they've got the best people. Two reasons around it. One is, the harder it is to get a job, the more people appreciate it. And what that means is, very often a tech guy comes in and, it's like, oh, well, okay, you sound great. Yeah, let's start. Right? If people feel it's too easy, it's a lot easier for them to leave. If they feel they struggled and they fought to get this job, they're a lot less likely to leave it. And the second thing is that when you're actually doing so, when you're doing the funnel and giving people things to challenges and stuff, you see who's really interested. I mean, so often you sit in an interview and you're like, well, why do you want this job? And it's like, I need money, right? If that's ever the response, just let them walk back out the door, right? They have to want to work with you because you're you. Like that, when you ask that question, they need to have fire in their eyes, and they want to, like, I want to work with you because you have an amazing company culture. I love your product. They have to want that job. And if people don't want that job, there's one of 2 things: either you haven't sold it good enough, and selling a job good enough is not making it sound easy. Selling a job good enough is targeting the right people. If your environment, and I don't think it's the right thing to do, but if your environment is, we work 16 hours a day, we have an installed bed in the office and all that stuff. If that is your environment, you need to sell it so that you get people who is comfortable with that, people who think like, whoa, that's fucking amazing. I want to be part of that culture, right? So you need to sell your business. You need to sell your values. You need to sell like the business strength, right? And if you do that well, then people will, like, the people who don't come to the interview wanting that job, just kick them out. But the people who want that job, that is the kind of people that you want in your business.
I think that desire aspect is the most underrated thing. I see. I feel like the best contracts I've ever landed were because I saw a project that I really wanted to do, and I knew I could really help this client. And you reach out to them, you have an initial conversation, and you don't hear back from them. And in my system, I have a way I follow up with them on a regular basis. It starts out at shorter intervals and then it spreads out to longer intervals. But I've actually spent 6 months following up with somebody, only to then end up landing the project. And then it ends up turning into 5 or 6 more projects because they know how much you want to work with them because you
Yep.
took the time to follow up. And I think it's the same you're right about. Like a Google, you say that, there's 7 interviews. Well, if you think about it, anyone who's willing to sit through 7 grueling interviews wants that job. And so you remove that element of, like you say, one of the biggest expenses for a business is hiring and training an employee who then leaves, because then you got to do it all over again. And nobody, like, people say, oh, I'll just go back to the pool. I think that's the worst thing you can do, because it's kind of like you break up with a person who you're in a relationship with. They're an ex for a reason. You don't go back to that. So there's a reason you eliminated a candidate. You shouldn't be going back to that candidate and going, well, the other guy left, so here, let me pull you in. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So one of the key things for me is, well, 2 key things around recruitment. One, recruitment is about elimination, not selection. Every time you talk with a candidate, every time you communicate them anything, you have to keep looking for reasons not to hire them. Most people do the opposite. They look for reason why this guy or girl would be a great hire. Do the opposite. Why would this person potentially fail?
Yeah, I take that and I apply that to my projects too. I try to disqualify. I actually learned this through NetSuite. NetSuite does this thing called Suite Success, and their initial contacts are to actually disqualify you from the need to use their product. Because if they just look for reasons to, that you'd want to use their product, you can find lots of those. But you have to find, like, maybe there's a process that they do that software can't handle. Well, then it's not the right fit. And I think it's the same for your projects. Take it to, you're talking about hiring employees. I actually call it hiring my client. And when I'm hiring a client, I look for reasons not to work with that client, because if I find them and they're not resolvable, then that's not a client I want to work with. And too many people these days are so hungry, so to say, that they take every project that comes their way. And what ends up happening is that just stagnates their growth, because they end up spending so much time putting out fires and having client meetings with an upset client that they never, it kind of goes back to that discussion we just had about giving positive feedback. If you pick a client who isn't the right fit for you, chances are you're going to get berated a lot. Like, there's going to be issues, and that's just demotivating. So no one wants that.
Yeah. No, let me come back to that in a second, right? So the second point about the recruitment process is people have, like, let's say you have 10 people left in the process and people end up hiring the best one. If the best one is not good enough, don't freaking hire them. So people always just look, who's the best? Don't do that. You have to look at, do you really believe this person will be a success, a smashing success in your company in the specific role? And if not, don't hire them just because they're the best one left. And I see it all the time. People are like, oh yeah, but we were desperate to hire. He was the best one. We hired him. Like, did you believe he would go in and smash this job? No, I was a bit insecure and I didn't, whatever, right? And you're like, the most expensive thing for businesses is hiring the wrong people, which is exactly the reason why the recruitment process is for elimination. The cost of hiring the wrong people in your business is the most expensive mistake you'll ever make. Right. Back to your other point. I love it. Right. One of the key things I work with all clients on, again, like, focus this way. Everyone, particularly early on, is like, oh, business, anyone that do anyone in technology, come my way, come my way. The problem is when you do that, you have no framework. You're not doing things consistently. You don't particularly know your clients or the market. When you do this, like, instead of tech, like, let me take the website example. So let's say you build websites. Now, if you build websites for anyone, you're good at building websites, right? But The
Right.
first question from every web developer is, what do you want? What color should it be? Right? It's like going, like if you go to an architect and need a house drawn and they say, you know, what materials and what should the house look like and stuff, and you're like, well, I
Right.
go to an architect to help me do that. The same thing as a web dev, as an example, you need to add value. And the problem is, if you don't know the niche, you don't know the market, you don't know what works in that market, you're not adding enough value, right? So the way you get to know the market is, instead of saying we do all sort of things, we build websites for carpenters. If we do
Yeah, there you go.
just that, what happens is, one, you can build a process. You can have actual framework that's easy to replicate again and again. Two, you get to know and understand the market. You get to know the lingo, the jargons, etc. And three, you can add value because you get to know what works. If you build a website for one person in that niche, you can easily start learning from those lessons. You can start doing conversion rate optimization. You can start testing things to make it work better. And if you're consistently working with clients in one segment of a market, like even your content brief, right? If you work with a carpenter in Kansas and a carpenter in Illinois or whatever, you know, it's the same keywords. Like it's the same. Like probably you shouldn't copy the content, but you can literally use the same content brief to get another content writer to write it, and yeah, you're off to go. So basically, the process is like you basically build a streamlined process that's easy to execute again and again. And that takes the most important thing away from the business owner, because often the business owner is like, oh, no one can do what I can do. That's why I have to be here. And the reason for that is you haven't focused, you haven't niched down, because one day you're building an e-commerce website, the next day a SaaS tool website, and the third day a dentist website. Like it's all custom processes.
Yeah,
So
and there's things you miss in that process. Well, you've shared a lot of great gems. How can my listeners find you if they want to work
yeah.
with you?
So Mads Singers, MADSSINGERS.com. And I actually have a free webinar as well on the top of my website where people can go through and learn a bit more management. But that's usually the best way to get me. I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn and all those fancy things. Might not be me replying, but I have a profile there at least. So again, Matt Singers everywhere. I think I'm the only person in the world with that name. So life is good.
Well, great. Well, I appreciate you being on. And to all the listeners, thanks for listening to the Technology Alchemist. You can find Mads Singers, as he says, on the internet, madssingers.com. He has a webinar there that you can look at. It's a nice website. He also has a podcast that you can find. Just search his name. And he's right. He's the only person that I found with that name, so shouldn't have any problem. But thanks again, Mads, and look forward to talking to you again.
My pleasure, Mike. Thank you very much for having me.